I have to turn the gain down a little. We're coming in hot.
Hot, hot, hot. That's the song we're doing this week.
Toyota's hot,
Buster
hot,
Poindexter.
Do they still do the Toyota's hot, hot, hot commercials, or was that
I
just
don't even know
the
where that
early
was.
2000s? Oh,
I don't remember them. Was that? I mean, because car commercials are so often local,
right?
I mean, of course, there are national car commercials.
Was that a? I almost said SoCal, Central Florida thing.
It could have been
like Family Auto Mart.
Like Family Auto Mart.
Family Auto Mart.
Jessica.
We'll see here.
On our last trip to Florida, Jessica was like, she had never shown me these Family Auto Mart commercials, and I was like shocked because they're like so up our alley.
Yeah.
They are like, there's not, because we love regional filmmaking, and basically these like commercials are like regional films, but they're like short films. Why would there be a YouTube ad for the Family Auto Mart collection?
This is the new family pack, led by the unbelievable Dave Buckner!
So this is the one where the Family Auto Mart is introducing all their.
You gotta find the Family Man rap and
See me. Get in your car. Come down and see me.
and Cletus and Poot.
Oh my god.
So they used to just like buy out blocks. Like you'd watch it after the 700 Club or something on like some random channel.
So this has been around since the 90s, and basically they look like Tim and Eric sketches.
They do.
But they're like one of the things, not specifically, but they're the type of thing that Tim and Eric like was based off of. It's like non-ironic. It's like an actual subject matter that Tim and Eric would be parodying, but for real. And I'm like, how were we married for 11 years and you never told me about this?
No.
So this is the song we're doing this week. It is the Family Auto Mart rap.
Sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride. We're about to get down, so you better step inside. We have a special guest, it's the Family Man, as seen on TV with the Buku minivan. As the life of the party, his moves are always tight. He shakes his bulbous body to the left and to the right. So get up, get ready.
I don't see what is more Relient than this. More 90s.
I'm doing the dance. Like
2000.
for any Florida folks out there, I'm doing the dance.
I don't know how else to cut to the song now, so. Failure to excommunicate.
Jesus loved the outcast. He loves the ones the world just loves to hate. And as long as there's a heaven, there'll be a failure to excommunicate.
He's the Family Man. Hello, everyone, and welcome to
Where
Sadie
did we leave
Hawkins'
off
pod.
with that song? Here we go. This one's from 2004. So this is like way too late, and this like
This is like this was no.
I'm saying
I
it's
think
from
that's
2004. There was a
maybe that's
copyright
why
thing.
I did not like introduce you to it, because we met just like a year later. So I just assumed the commercials were still out there and you were still probably seeing them because you loved Appliance Direct, and so you paid retail and waited for it. And yeah, so I just assumed that you would have seen this, I guess. But yeah, they definitely started in like the late 90s. And now it's so sad because I went online to see if you could still get Family Auto Mart merch. Nope. They have a very old school basic website with like one location. And it's very sad.
yeah. We'll post
Such a bummer.
instead of posting. Well, we're talking about failure to excommunicate this week. Spoiler warning for what we're going to go over. This is a song with big contrast to last week where it was nothing but amazing covers. Even the the lesser of the covers still had a quality that was fun. This is a song that no one can like cover correctly. Like all the covers are really bad. So instead of, I hate saying that they're really bad, but the covers aren't good. So instead of posting Failure to Excommunicate covers in the coming week, I'll just post Family Auto Mart footage.
Nice. I love it. Do it.
So, we have. Let's try to get through some more voicemails because we have so many.
Right on.
And let's see what we have here first.
Do the Family Man.
guys, good morning. It's Lindy here in the South Florida region.
Yeah,
perfect,
shout out Florida.
So does Lindy remember Family Auto Mart?
Yeah, because I'm trying to think how far south they went. They were definitely a Central Florida institution, but yeah. It's so funny because it came up because we were visiting my parents in South Florida, and my mom like brought it up or something. I was like, oh my gosh, I forgot all about Family Auto Mart, and how have I never introduced Annie to this? I think I just didn't bring it up over the years because I assumed I had already introduced you to it.
Right.
I'm currently listening to Air for Free. Well, the Air for Free episode. I just wanted to call in because you guys were talking about a coffee shop called Romancing the Bean, and I am somewhat of a coffee, I wouldn't say snob, I would say something like a connoisseur. I have devoted my Instagram to actually finding local coffee shops that are super yummy and eclectic and cool. So that sounds like a pretty sweet place to go. I wish I was closer, but being as I'm on the East Coast, that's probably not going to happen in the near future. But you're also talking about coffee ice cubes, and I really don't know where else this place is except for like Florida and like New Jersey, New York. But there's a place called Brooklyn Water Bagel down here. And their whole thing is, their, like, slogan is, it's all about the water. Because I guess there's just, like, something special about the water in New York.
Have you heard of Brooklyn Water Bagel?
I have not, but we're going to have to check that out next time we go visit my parents. My ears perked up because we also love finding new and interesting coffee.
They have really good bagels, and they also do coffee ice cubes. And they're freaking fantastic, and you're absolutely right, Jessica. They make the coffee so much better so that it's not watered down. You just get more of a caffeine kick, which is just the best part. So, yeah, we have something like that down here. I just wondered if you have ever heard of it. Also, I left a lot of voicemails the last couple weeks, and I didn't realize you weren't going to play them all, so I feel like a lot of them could probably be just tossed. Because I was one of the ones you listed as people that call a lot and leave voicemails. So anyway, this will be something more current. Okay, cool. Bye.
Well, thank you for calling, Lindy. No, I don't want to give the wrong impression. We love when
voicemails.
People call. We love voicemails. Please don't stop calling. As I said last week, if I've never played, and I'm talking to everyone who's ever left a voicemail, if I've never played your voicemail, it hasn't been lost. We just don't find the time to play them all. So we'll play them when we play them. Plus, I have this OCD thing that makes me feel like I want to play all of them someday. So we will get to them, and I do want people to call up as much as they like.
I'm glad that you started with the most current, though.
So here's an older one from Jarrett. Let's see what he had to say.
Hey, Jen and Jess. This is Jarrett. I was listening to the Vinyl Countdown podcast, and y'all unlocked a memory for me. So I was at that Carborough show, North Carolina, where Thiessen does the Freebird snippet, or whatever you want to call it, and then they did the Vinyl Countdown acoustic.
Okay, I remember, because this voicemail is from April. So if you might recall, when we did Final Countdown, Vinyl Countdown, right, sorry. When they said, people were in the audience yelling, play Freebird, and Thiessen has this, song about playing Freebird that he'll play if you request Freebird. So now, I guess Jarrett was there live to see it one time.
That's awesome.
Because I remember in that moment, one, just to show how young and non-musical I was, I didn't know what Freebird sounded like. So when Matt was like, Freebird, or whatever he did, I was like, oh, that's cool. He did the chorus to Freebird. And of course now that I'm a man and I know things, I know that was not exactly how Freebird goes. But also I remember when they started doing the Vinyl Countdown, I turned to my cousin, because he had just gotten into Relient K. I was like, this is cool. This is the acoustic version. This is normally electric. Trying to sound like I'm in the know. But yeah, like, I totally forgot they did the Freebird thing in the Vinyl Countdown, because Setlist FM doesn't have that, at least that I saw, doesn't have that show on their website. And so I was always wondering what exactly they played. I know they did a few from Collapse Go Along and a few here and there, but I totally forgot they did the Vinyl Countdown until I listened to the podcast and that clip said it was there. So thank y'all.
Cool. Well, I'm glad. I always love when that happens. Like, we come across footage of concerts we've been to so seldom that I love hearing if people have actually been to any of the shows from the clips that we play. Right. Plus, there are so many, like, the big songs, I end up finding, like, you know, sometimes 30 or 40 videos from different concerts throughout the decades of a song, and then, like, who knows which one will end up playing, and then for that to happen, well, a song like Vinyl Countdown, the odds are even less, because there's, like, only 2 live videos of that song. So your Freebird
story is hilarious. I don't know if Danny will leave in our laughter or not, because usually he edits in the
the voicemail after. But that's hilarious to think that, like, you don't know what. You know what? I'd heard the reference to play Freebird, but I actually never went and listened to the song Freebird until Guitar Hero.
Right.
And I'm older, so you think I'd have more chance. And I never watched maybe if I'd seen that Rob Zombie movie.
House of a Thousand Corpses, or the sequel,
Devil's Rejects.
Devil's Rejects. There we go.
Maybe if I'd seen that, I would have known Freebird. But I probably had heard it on the radio as a kid, but had no reference to what it is. You know what I mean? But I never said, "Oh, this is Freebird," until it was on Guitar Hero. So let's play one more. I feel like if we do 3 a day, let's do another from Lindy, because I feel bad that it seems like I was saying we don't want to play your voicemails, because that was not the case. So here's another from Lindy. This one is from June.
Hey guys, it's Lindy. I feel like I leave 1,000 voicemails all the time, but normally when I'm listening to the pod, I am driving home from work, so I have it on my mind. I'm like, oh, I should call. I'm currently on episode 44 in the parfait style of listening. And you guys are talking about avatars, and that Danny doesn't really pay attention to people's avatars, and you saw one that looked like Sweet Tooth, the clown from something. I don't know if it was a game or what, I can't remember. But I just thought... I relate that to the license plate for Florida, because in my opinion, from far away, the Florida license plate that has the oranges in the middle with, you know, the state of Florida, well, for the longest time, I did not know that those were oranges, because from far away, when you're driving and not really paying attention to a license plate, it strangely resembles a gorilla with a football helmet. So, I just probably 6 years ago realized it was not a gorilla with a football helmet. It is, in fact, oranges with the state of Florida. So, yeah, anyway. I'm odd. Okay, bye.
That's amazing. I have to hold on a second. Florida.
I can picture it in my head, and I haven't seen that, but yeah, for sure.
Okay, hold on. I've got it up on my thing, and I'm holding the phone far away from me. I'm like it kind of looks like a disfigured Pac-Man that's like
right
chomping on some flowers.
It's like 2 oranges with the flowers, which is the state flower, which I don't know what the state flower is. I don't remember now.
Or is that like is that an orange blossom?
Oh, I don't know. Good call.
Hence, Orange Blossom Trail. Lots of Florida talk this week.
Yeah. Welcome to our Florida podcast.
So you could say, in the way that I don't haven't played enough of Lindy's voicemails, when they have such great content in them, that's a failure to communicate her voicemails to our listeners.
I think it used to just be 1 orange in the middle with a little green sticking out of it.
I don't know.
I feel like that's a redesign. I don't remember.
Maybe there was. I don't know. I'm going to hold on. Florida license plates. Gorilla football helmet. I'm going to see if anyone is like on Reddit or something. No,
Oh boy.
like nothing comes up specifically like that, but I can't see the I see what she's saying, but I can't exactly see the I get it. I totally get it. You know what used to drive me crazy was the D for Disney. This is also Florida related.
Yeah.
The D for Disney always looked like a backwards G. When I was a kid, I did not get that flourish.
I can see that.
Right? Like the round part, like I focused in on that little flourish at the bottom left, and it made it look like a musical note or a backwards G. And I know I'm not the only person. Forever, I never heard anyone else ever say this. But then there's like some meme video that I saw one time on YouTube, and I'm like, oh, like where someone was like, Gizney, Gizney. And like I was like, oh, finally one person ever has said that they see the same thing. And again, you could say Disney's backwards G logo is a failure to communicate the D correctly. But that's not the name of the song we're doing this week. We're talking about failure to communicate.
To communicate or to excommunicate?
Oh my gosh. We're talking about failure to excommunicate.
We're failing to communicate our feelings on this song right now.
Yeah, so we'll get into the song. And
Who is
I got
singing?
a ton to say. Oh, yeah. Well, I got a ton to say about this song from a lyrical point of view and everything. But it's Dave singing.
Is it Dave?
It's Dave
I was
singing.
not sure. So that's my first note. My first note was who is singing, and I was too lazy to go pull the CD or the vinyl and look it up.
I'm not sure if it might specifically
Yeah,
say.
'cause
We
it
could
does
go
not-
grab it, but it's Dave singing.
Okay.
Because
It doesn't say it, like,
sounds-
online.
Because whenever Hoops is singing, I can tell it's not Thiessen. Whenever Dave is singing, I can barely not tell that isn't Thiessen. You know what I mean? Dave and Thiessen, at least for sure when Dave was in Relient K, they sound so similar to me. It was
Right.
Who I Am Hates Who I've Been. Like, I could never tell the parts that Dave was singing until we did the episode and we watched the live videos.
Yes, and that's why, because it doesn't sound like Thiessen, I'm like, well, it doesn't sound like Thiessen, it doesn't sound like Hoops, so, like, therefore it doesn't sound like Dave either to me. So
Right.
that's why I was like, who is singing? And I could not figure it out. And I'm also showing my hand a little bit as a Relient K fan today. I had no idea what album this song was from, which really should have told me that it was off Anatomy, since that would be like next to Collapsible Lung, the album that I listened to the least.
Right.
And it's because here's why I got confused, because Life After Death and Taxes or Failure 2 is off. So in my mind, I get confused and I'm like, wait, is Failure to Excommunicate an song? And I'm like, no, like not listening to it, like the style or the lyrics or how it comes across at all.
Right.
I just like in my brain, I'm like looking at titles and I'm like, Failure to Excommunicate. Sure, maybe that's on it.
I think Failure Part 2, they should have called, I mean, we'll get to it when we do Life After Death and Taxes, parentheses, Failure Part 2. I added the word part there. We'll get to it then, but what they really should have called it was Failure, the number 2, Excommunicate, Life After Death and Taxes. Like Coming to America. The sequel is called Coming, the number 2, America. Or Too Fast, Too Furious.
In the next
to
album,
Failure to Excommunicate.
they have to have Failure 2.
There you go. So I think that Failure Part 2, I'm just going to keep saying part so we know when I'm talking about Life After Death and Taxes. I think Failure Part 2 is a bigger song overall. I mean, for one thing, it's on It obviously has been played a ton because if anything else, the 10 tour. But also I just think it's people know that song better.
Yeah.
Doesn't seem to be a song that got played a ton. There's like maybe 2 live videos, and as I was saying, there's a bunch of live like teen bands at youth groups and churches trying to cover the song and not doing a great job. But it doesn't seem like a song that got played a ton. It didn't make an impact in their overall like repertoire, their overall like set lists, like Life After Death and Taxes did.
Right. So I did not really dive into the lyrics because I know that you have a lot to say about this one. So I kind of wanted to learn about the song, or it's in your interpretation, like through you.
Okay. Well, I got a little bit more to say about the music because that'll be a big discussion. So we'll talk about the music a little bit more. I did want to say that a couple weeks back we had a tweet. It was a tweet at us and Reliable J podcast from epic_Mr_Panda. And it said, do either of you have an episode explaining Failure to Excommunicate? That song has had me confused for a very long time. And then I asked, like, what part confused you? And they just meant, like, the whole song in general. So hopefully... So here we are. We're giving that episode. And I saved... And then there was, like, a thing... I guess I'll save that for lyric talk. I saved all these tweets because we've had a bunch of tweets over the years about this song, people waiting for this episode.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until that tweet from Epic Mr. Panda that I was pretty much ready to talk about this song. And then I had like issues and all this continued depression issues that I've been having that I didn't really want to unload with this song when some things were still a little too tender to discuss, because I have stories from my own life that relate to this song as well, in addition to larger discussions about theology and racism and stuff overall that the song brings to mind. Oh, and I also pulled this one tweet where one time back in December last year we were talking about Forward Motion, and you said that the opening riff of Forward Motion reminded you of some other Relient K song, and you couldn't quite place it. And you could... Daniel, you could see my sock said he thinks you were thinking of Failure to Excommunicate.
Okay.
Right, so here's Forward Motion. And then here's Failure to Excommunicate.
I'm not that musically inclined to be like, that sounds like that. I don't think so.
I mean,
I'm sure from a music standpoint, because Daniel would know far better than I, that it's the same thing but like faster or whatever.
Right.
But that so I don't know what it was, but it probably wasn't this one.
Well, the opening lick of Failure to Excommunicate, which I did not notice until this second, is bass, and then Forward Motion is guitar. So. So it's like it's around like 6 notes, and then, or half notes. I don't know if it's notes or half notes or whatever, but then Failure 1 2 3 4 5. And it's around the same kind of number of notes, so I can see how it would
from an intelligent similar. Music standpoint to the discerning ear.
They're both like they both have that same kind of cadence.
Yeah.
So I see how they can be kind of the same, or how they could sound kind of the same. So this is another in like what I thought was not a big subgenre of Relient K songs, but it's maybe a little bigger than I ever realized, is the sort of like pseudo post-hardcore Relient K, which is never really, like, you could never take a song like this or Softer to Me, and there's a third one that I mentioned recently that we already did the episode on, but these like songs that you could never play them for someone who's into like post-hardcore or like expressive alternative artsy music or whatever and say, here's a post-hardcore song by Relient K. They laugh at you, right? But this song, along with Softer to Me, and whatever that third one is I can't think of right now, are these versions of, here's Matt Thiessen, Relient K, writing something in the way of a post-hardcore kind of song. Something that's like punk and heavy and fast, but also has a lot of different expression. Because that's, post-hardcore is a very... I always had the hardest time understanding the concept of post-hardcore, and then I actually saw this documentary called It's Gonna Blow, which is about the punk scene or the alternative rock and punk scene in San Diego. And it is kind of accidentally the perfect documentary to wrap your head around the concept of post-hardcore. Because I always got the concept of post-hardcore is like, whatever, it's like, you know, my references for it when I was in college and high school were like At the Drive-In, or like Fugazi, obviously, is kind of the most famous one. But basically they were like punk bands that had more like not just doing straight ahead punk stuff, but doing more expression, being able to do more different things with the guitar, writing more different kinds of songs, as long as they're heavy and sort of like dark. Like, I never really got it. Also, post-hardcore for me was always mixed up with the concept of emo, because whenever I started researching emo in high school, like early emo, before emo became like My Chemical Romance or whatever, any emo website, store with an emo section online would always kind of lump emo together with post-hardcore. So I was like, oh, is post-hardcore just another name for emo? And it sort of is. Like, there's a Venn diagram where post-hardcore and emo kind of come together, because emo has more expression, more ability, more things you can do with guitar than just doing a straight ahead, like, couple of chords punk song, right? So this It's Gonna Blow documentary about the San Diego punk scene, it starts with like the punk bands, like the actual punk bands of San Diego in the 80s, and you see how they got bored slowly just doing punk songs, and they add a little bit more extra stuff in the guitar here, and they add a little bit more extra stuff in the guitar there, and more like angular things and more like strange stuff, and that's what creates post-hardcore. So that really helped me wrap my mind around that, right? But then you have people like myself who didn't live through that. So you're kind of, and I'm talking about like 90s kids, like late 90s kids like me. I'm like, what's post-hardcore? Can someone explain this? And no one could ever really explain it until I saw the documentary. So here you have what I feel like is Matt Thiessen and Relient K kind of doing like a post-hardcore, like it's kind of punk, but it has more attempts at angular and more expression with guitar than a typical punk song, right?
Yes.
Sure.
Well said. That is exactly how I was going to put it, so...
Well, good. So, this is a situation where the gold... I'm getting them ready to play. This is a situation where the gold and the non-gold version are clearly different, but it's kind of like 50-50 in terms of what's like a good decision and what's a bad decision. Like, I can't really say, you know, one decision was better than the other. It's all kind of like, all the changes they made are just like, it's not the typical gold mix changes. Jessica looks really bored. Are you really bored?
No, Danny, I'm leaning on my hand, like leaning forward as the professor discusses something really interesting is what I'm doing.
Okay. So this is a situation where so many other, you know, and to catch anyone up who might not realize this, if you haven't heard an anatomy or Two Lefts episode in a while or before, when these CDs came out in 2002 and 2003, they were mixed one way, and then after they remixed both these albums to basically gloss them over. And a lot of the criticism is that it kind of removes a lot of as much of the human elements of Anatomy and Two Lefts as possible, like hearing fingers on strings, or like feeling like you feel it's a real instrument in someone's hand, or kind of glossed over. Everything's kind of, the edges are smoothed off of those mixes. And if you only have ever listened to Relient K on streaming, even though it doesn't say it's the gold mix on Spotify and Apple Music and anything like that, those are the gold mixes. So if you want to hear the original 2003 and 2002 mixes, you have to go on YouTube and kind of like figure it out, because again, people upload them to YouTube and don't necessarily mark is this the gold or the non-gold version that they uploaded. But the thing is, the CDs in the world, I mean, what has it got to be, like 90% of the CDs in the world are the non-gold mix, because they didn't print that many CDs comparatively to when the albums were first released. Certainly not for Anatomy. I think the Anatomy gold copy mix CDs out there have to be even less. Like, if you buy a random eBay copy of Two Lefts, I'm just guessing these numbers right now, but I'm like, maybe there's a 25 or maybe a 20% chance you'll get a gold mix CD. But if you buy a used copy of Anatomy on eBay that the seller doesn't know if it's gold or not, I feel like you got like a 1% chance of getting a gold copy of Anatomy. So really just go buy yourself a CD, and the chances are you're going to get the non-gold mix if you want to make sure that's what you're listening to. So all of the changes, however, in Failure to Excommunicate for the gold remix are sort of like just like flavoring like cutesy ideas. So in the original mix, there's a lot of like record static, or what would you call it? Record crackle. Mm-hmm. They add a lot of record crackle in the background, especially during the sort of like breakdowny parts.
Oh yeah.
Right here Oh yeah, and Thiessen does pop in occasionally, right? Like I think it's Dave singing a lot of it, but then Thiessen pops in to sing like the chorus and stuff. So during this slowed down, soft part of the chorus, they add all this record scratch, especially during this part, right? But then they remove that from the gold mix.
Huh.
Or at least they seriously reduce it.
You can hear it a little, but it's
but they seriously reduce it.
Yeah, it's very reduced.
So during this sort of like this, I don't know if this counts as a breakdown, but after the slow, quiet chorus, this little guitar part that leads you back into the kicking back into the song. It's basically this part of the two mixes is night and day, because in the gold mix they remove the record crackle, and they put that guitar just right up. We're just there's the guitar, no fussing around, no fuss, no muss. There's the guitar going do 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 do. But when you listen to the original 2002 mix, they get more dramatic with it here.
Yeah.
There's actually, I feel like this would actually go, I hope, I don't think I have it backwards, but I feel like this is something they would have put in the gold, I feel like it would be reverse, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like they'd get more dramatic in the 2004
What an interesting
remix.
production choice, though, to have all that record crackle.
All that record crackle, and the is way down, and it comes, and they like bring it up dramatically just in time for the kick back in. Huh. So there's like more mixing drama or more like decisions with the mixing in the original mix, which they remove from the 2004 remix. So, and I just find that funny because it's, like I said, it's a matter of opinion for this one. Like so many other gold remixes, when you hear them, you're like, this one's not as fun. It makes it a little less punk. It makes it a little less rock. But this one is like 50-50. It's like, what do you prefer? Do you prefer the more dramatic, like funny sort of narrative decisions? April's got an opinion.
Yeah, she does.
And then
she's like, listen, guys, it's the gold for me on this one. I was going to say, I really want to hear the difference between the
violin
gold,
at the end.
Yes, because I love that. Like, there's like, it feels like there's an old-timey radio filter over it on the gold edition.
Right.
So I was like, I really want to hear how that comes across in the non-gold.
There's so much like bells and whistles in the mix, right? Like not only do they add the record crackle, but then they make the violins sound like they're coming out of a Vitrola or whatever, coming out of an old radio.
I haven't listened to the non-gold version, so I'm saying play me the end so that I can hear the difference.
Here's the gold version, which everyone hears on streaming all the time, of the last 40 seconds. So there's that from the gold mix that most people have heard nowadays, and here's the original CD mix.
Failure to excommunicate.
So yeah, so you've got that sort of like that old-timey radio sort of like tuning the radio type thing that they've put in at the end there versus on the gold version that does not have that.
I might have skipped out too early. Okay, hold on.
Okay.
Here's let's go back. This is
just more
original
record
mix.
crackle, which now we gotta go listen to this on vinyl. It's like, is there just extra crackle on the vinyl?
Oh yeah.
Is it just crackle on crackle?
Good question. Okay, so that sort of whistly sound. This is gold again. Okay, so they still have that. But I have to say, like, with all these, I can only really think to call them like narrative decisions because they're like dramatic and it's the kind of all this mixing things up and down and adding these effects make it sound more like a story, more like, that's why I think narrative, right? So these narrative mixing decisions in the original mix, they are a bit over the top. So I think in this case, the gold remix is the slightly better one.
Yeah, because they like definitely toned that down.
Yeah.
And because I really like the ending, the outro.
Right.
Like that's my favorite part of the song. So with the extra crackle on top going throughout.
Yeah.
Sort of off-putting a little bit.
In the non-gold one, right?
Yes. Yeah. Oh my gosh, I'm getting you're confusing me now.
It is too off-putting because to have it sound like it's coming through an old radio and to have the vinyl crackle.
Right.
Unless the decision in 2002 was, here's the vinyl crackle and we make it sound, trebly like an old record would be.
Right.
Right, but it's too confusing, especially when you have all that crackle in the middle of the song where you don't put the treble up high and you don't put on the radio vinyl effect.
Right. I like the woo, the like radio tuning noise. It reminds me of the opening of Bad Reputation by Joan Jett.
Nice. There's got to be like a whole bunch of songs that start with a little radio noise. I wonder if there's like a playlist on Spotify or something. So yeah, this is probably one of the situations where the gold mix that's on all the streaming sites is probably superior. And I mean, as usual, like the dynamic, the levels between the instruments and the vocals are sort of glossed over, so you do lose some of that nuance when there's no effects going on in the original mix. You do lose some of that nuance of the instruments, right? Because they basically just like sanded it off, so all the levels are mixed like right in your face for the gold mix that everyone knows. And this is on the Employee of the Month EP. And I want to check something. We're like almost done with the Employee of the Month EP. We did Trademark, right? Okay, we did Trademark, we did Penny Loafer, we did For the Band. All we have left on the Employee of the Month EP is What's All Been Done Before.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so we're almost done with this. I think we've already finished the 2000 ADD EP. I think that's the only EP that we've technically finished. Have we finished Apathetic? We didn't do The Truth yet, no. And we did Be My Escape, we did Witch to Bury. Did we do Overthinking? I don't remember. We did In Like a Lion, and we haven't done The Thief, so we're not even close with Apathetic. But we got one song left on the Employee of the Month. So that's another reason why I love this song, is because I used to play Employee of the Month front to back continually. It was in my car. It lived in my car for a long time. So we will take a break right now. We will take our break right now, and then we'll come back. We'll unpack the lyrics, because I think this is kind of Relient K's maybe that one of their denser lyrical songs. So we'll be right back.
We want to thank you very much for listening to Sadie Hawkins Pod. Please follow us on Twitter and Instagram, which are both at Sadie Hawkins Pod. From there, you can interact with us, as well as view the videos and images we talk about on the show.
You can also call our voicemail line, which is 402-95-SADIE. That's 402-957-2343. Leave us a message and we can play it on a future episode.
Also, we invite you to check out SadieHawkinsPod.com, one simple place to get links to all our social media and a link to our TeePublic store.
There you can pick up merchandise, or merch as it's known in the industry, We have our Black Flag parody shirt, our little Sheet Boy ice cream shirt, and our all-new Boys from Canton ampersand shirts that list the first names of every album lineup of Relient K.
And if you can't get enough of us, well, good news. At patreon.com/SadieHawkinspod, we are releasing at least 2 bonus episodes a month. You'll also have access to our whole backlog, including our discussion of Owl City's Ocean Eyes, reading through the Complex Infrastructure book, and the songs from K is for Karaoke.
Finally, we want to thank our current patrons, who include Daniel, Josh, JR, Jarrett, Eric, Joel, Connor, Michael, Helen, Samantha, Roxanne, Jimmy Eat Pod, This Might Be a Podcast, Tucker, David, and Brady.
We hope to see you there, and even if we don't, we hope that you will keep us in positive regard.
Aww. So, this song is kind of like one of Relient K's few SJW songs, right? In a not direct way, but in a direct way. It kind of depends on how you approach the song. Mm-hmm. Because for the longest time, when I heard this song when it originally came out, there's a lot going on, and I think there's multiple interpretations, and none of them are necessarily wrong that I have, right? Like, and whatever other interpretations people might have, I got to kind of go through my history of what I thought of this song. When I first used to hear this song, I somehow interpreted it, and I wasn't like happy with this interpretation, but I somehow interpreted it as like a persecution, like the Christian persecution complex kind of point of view, of like, you're a Christian and people judge you, right? There's so much of that in the Christian psyche, in the American Christian psyche especially, because like Christians used to really be persecuted.
Right.
Like Christians like hundreds and thousands of years ago, like Christians in Japan and stuff, like they were really persecuted.
Yeah.
But then in America, sometimes like there's this, or somehow there becomes this idea that like you have to be persecuted to like show that your faith is real. And what happens in America, because we are, I'm not saying we're in a Christian country in the sense that everyone proudly says we're a Christian country, but we are a country of largely Christians, and there's so many Christians in power, and like there's this whole section in the middle of the country that is like strongly identifies themselves as Christian. It's like we're not really persecuted in that way. Right? So I kind of interpret
the way that we're persecuted is more of, you know, being cornered in homeroom and the other girls bullying you because you wear a cross necklace every day. And they're like, where's your God now, as we push you against this wall and the teacher doesn't care.
Right, and that sucks and that's awful. But, like, that's bullying.
Yeah.
And, like, they could have done that if you had, like, red hair and freckles.
Right.
They could have done that if you were another race.
Right.
And they were all white, right? Like,
but, like, heaven forbid you're Christian and like Star Wars. That makes you a massive outcast, let me tell you.
But not if you like,
especially
not if you're
in
a Christian.
Small private schools.
Right. Not if you're a Christian and you like anime. Because as we figured out in a past episode, Christian otakus, they're out there. Anyway.
Pretty sure I would have gotten bullied for that, too.
Oh, definitely. So I kind of used to interpret this song back in 2002 and for many years afterwards as like a Christian persecution song. Like, specifically, like, it's the issue that your principal would dismiss you because you don't fit into that all-American box. Like, that made me think of the story, the narrative that is so strong, especially in 90s and 2000s, like Christian pop culture and news reporting, of like a Christian at a school who's being told you can't pray, or you can't do this, or you can't have your prayer club, or you can't meet me at the pole, or you're too Christian and there can't be religion in this school, or whatever, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. That's a common narrative that would be like pushed by different Christian reporting, and like then your pastors and your schools, your Christian schools and your Christian churches would like talk about those stories, right? So I always kind of interpreted it as that, but I don't think that's exactly what's going on. Like, I think it could be some of that. Like, it could be some of like, because there is this stuff talking about Jesus loves. Well, there's so much going on. Eventually my mind changed from it being about that. Like, there could be an aspect of that in here, but I think it also this song is open to the wider world, right? Mm-hmm. So let's kind of dig in. So it's kind of starting out. It's the principle. It's the issue that your principal would dismiss you because you don't fit into that all-American box. that coffin created for creative thought, right? So from the lens of Relient K being, especially at this time, very devout Christian band, like on Anatomy, they were still a ministry band. Like they did, not altar calls, I don't think, but they were still like doing some proselytizing during sets and stuff. And they were still playing with bands like the Supertones, who very specifically were there to like have altar calls and worship sets and prayers in the middle of their sets and stuff. So Relient K is still coming from the point of view of being a ministry. When you look at it through that lens, yeah, you can see how I originally interpreted it. But just taking that first verse out on its own, that's not even necessarily a religious concept at all. It can still be a story about how, like, those 4 lines can still be a thing about, like, school is a place that stifles your creativity. It's a place that puts you in a line to say, this is how we are conditioning you to function in the society we want you to function in. Don't question things. Just get your grades. Like, don't worry about what is your learning language or whatever, right? Like, just this is the form we have. This is how it works. You got to learn this way and you got to test this way. And if you fail, you fail and you don't get your degree.
I'm just thinking about how ridiculous my high school was, because it's like I went to high school and that first year my high school was a very small private school. The year prior, it had opened like a year or two before as a homeschool co-op. And then they got the accreditation, they got a building, and they became a private school the year that I started as a Montessori type school where there were going to be no grades, there were going to be no tests. Like, they just like gave you a GPA at the end of the year based on how well you did and seemed to actually understand and reflect the knowledge. And so my first year there, it was still being run by, there were teachers, but it was still being run by the 2 sets of like parents who started the school. And it's funny because I said, I was bullied for being a Christian, which I always thought was like the weirdest thing to be bullied for, because I'm like, what year is this? Why are you bullying me for this particularly? Like, I get bullying me for it's 2001, 2002, and I'm like a weird, awkward, introvert, nerdy girl who's like into Star Wars and, you know, always has a camera like around her hand and stuff. Like, I totally, and like just writes all the time. I totally get that. But like,
Right.
What a weird thing to be persecuted for, not persecuted, but what a weird thing to be bullied for is like being a Christian. And so this school they were like trying to be like, oh, we're so open and so whatever. And like, we want to teach you the way you need to be taught. And then the people who started the school was my homeroom teacher, and her daughter was one of the ones doing the bullying, which is why it was gotten away with. So because she didn't care that her daughter was bullying me for that. And when we went to who was supposed to be the headmaster / guidance counselor, who was the other set of family who started the school, she was like supposed to be like they were a Buddhist supposedly, and now these they're just like as American, you know, as apple pie, but
That
they were
all-American
like
box.
Yeah, they were like Buddhist and like really big into like the Dalai Lama and his teachings, and she very much just like was like, oh, well, we don't care that you're getting bullied for your religion or anything, and whatever, like everyone just coexist and be happy and this and that. And it's like, wow, really? And so I had a lot of trouble.
That's your role in life,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, it was very much just like nothing was really being done about it, and it became a thing where, again, nothing was done about it until my mom was like, I will pull my daughter out of this school if you do not shape up. Like they had already paid my tuition at a different school when they found this school, and were like, oh, we feel that Jessica would thrive and do much better here. So they put me into this school. They're like, we can go send her to the other school. We'll do that. And then finally things started to kind of get done about it. And then thankfully, so I had a really hard year that first year. Thankfully, someone else came in and like purchased the school, and like we had a proper principal and things, and they actually like we had proper like authority come in after that for my next 3 years. So it was a much better atmosphere.
You told me bits and pieces of the story,
yeah.
but I don't think you've told it to me from like like in this specific way before.
Yeah, and it was very like we were non-denominational. The other owner was Jewish, but didn't really practice their faith or whatever. So
Right.
it's just it was a different atmosphere.
What if bullying was that girl's way of being creative? That was her way of breaking out of that
absolutely
all-American
was
box.
her way of being creative.
So that original principal didn't want to stifle that one student.
Yeah.
I'm kidding. I just randomly called to mind, there's a Descendants song off of their more recent album, not the B-side album that is coming out or just came out. It is out? Yeah, it's out now. Not Ninth and Walnut, but Hypercaphium Sphazinate. There's a song on there called Limiter, and it's a similar thing about like what school does to a kid. Like how it's supposed to be this place that like where you
Nurtures
learn
you
and grow
yeah.
and you're nurtured, but it actually is like there to like constrict you and make you be one thing.
And I know people have it way harder with bullying and stuff. I'm just saying, like, it was just such an odd atmosphere where they tried to, like, they tried to preach that we are this school where it's like, we're here for, the more kinesthetic learners, the hands-on learners who need, the extra bit of attention. We're really small and stuff. And then when it came to more, like, social issues, they just didn't care.
Right.
It was just like any other school, which is just so odd and so fascinating to me.
Right. Also, I'm just looking up the lyrics to Limiter. Yeah, and there's some other stuff about like over medicating kids, which I do believe in medication for like emotional and psychological issues, but there is definitely a problem with over medicating kids, like children. Like they should be sort of it's got to make sense. You got to work together. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I was put on Ritalin in first grade, so.
Right. I don't think drugs existing is the issue. I'm talking about this Descendants song. But it also comes up. It'll come up in another
Relient K song. Yeah, I was like, I didn't think we were going to go to that there this
drugs,
week.
Look what that did. But
we'll talk more about that when we get there.
But there is a thing where if you're not in the hands of a competent doctor or a doctor who really cares, you could be over-medicated. You could over-medicate your child. Mm-hmm. We have a family member who is literally being on the wrong medication and like their short-term memory has been affected. So there is that issue. You have to be in the hands of a competent, caring physician, a medical professional to figure that stuff out. It's not that the drugs themselves are the wrong thing. Just like school is not something that's wrong, but school in the hands of incompetent or uncaring people is a place that destroys lives. I have all these stories to talk about school, and I don't even know if I can get into all of them because it's so funny. When Jessica met me, she's like, "Oh, Danny's so laid back and chill, and he does really good here in college." And I did good in college because I was kind of in a climate, in an atmosphere, in a way that I could like learn and I could take it on myself. But like all throughout elementary school and middle school and high school, I had some of like teachers and administrators who just were awful at their job and like didn't give me, and my parents also didn't understand what I needed because I'm sure they were raised in a certain way, in a way in which school worked, that it was a huge problem for me. And looking back on it now, like there was some application I could have done, but I was a child trying to learn my way in the world. Like I needed adults who were competent to say, "Oh, Danny, here's where you can apply yourself. Here's what you can do. Here's where you can grow. And then if I don't work in that atmosphere that's better for me, then that's on me." But if I'm a child only being given the system I'm given and it's not working, there's something wrong with the adults making the decisions around my life, right? So I had a lot of bad teachers and bad administrators who did not know how, and I'm sure I was not the only kid because like I went to public school for many years, and I had this one particular situation with a teacher that like I actually ended up going to private school after that, and I only went to Christian schools. I could have gone to many different kinds of private schools, but I ended up going to Christian schools just because they kind of made the most sense for me. It wasn't from like a religious point of view. Like we looked at a number of different kind of private schools, but I just basically couldn't be in the public school system anymore. My parents were trying to figure it out, like what's the issue, and they knew I was smart and stuff, but like school was such a bad place for me. And then like later, had all kinds of issues. Even in the Christian schools, I had issues because I went to like 1, 2, 3. I went to 3 different Christian schools. And in one case, the school closed down. In one case, I was doing really well at the first Christian private school I went to, and they closed down.
That makes me so sad.
And then the second one was actually more of a regular-sized high school, and they were actually in a high school building. Like, they'd bought a high school building from the town that they were located in. They were bigger, and I was not doing well there. And I had a number of teachers there who were awful. And it's like, as soon as like I'm treated badly by a teacher, like back then, I would kind of shut down and be like, what's the point? Like, especially because I was already like gun shy from the way I'd been treated by public school. And then eventually we found this other school that was more like the first school that closed down, where I met my friend Johnny, where I started seeing, during that school, I started seeing Relient K shows and all these kind of things. And that's when I discovered like local bands. And that's when I started actually discovering music and things that like I could pour myself into that made me happy extracurricularly. And so, but I still had issues there where my parents were basically like getting ready to get divorced, and like my home life was so incredibly unstable, and I was just so incredibly unhappy that like I didn't really apply myself. Now in this case, I didn't apply myself, but like I wasn't given much of a chance. And then there was like this big meeting with the teachers and my dad, and all it was about was what I'm not doing right. And I was like, sure, I could have there was an aspect at this point in 12th grade where I wasn't applying myself as hard as I could in this bad home life situation, but there was never a discussion or even like relenting to the idea that maybe I'm not in a good enough situation. Like there's something obviously outside of myself that was affecting this. So then once I got to college, I don't have any of my family around. College is a much different situation where, you know, you're not like going to school and staying there all day, and you have more time, and classes are actually less of your day. So I loved college. Yeah. And I was actually able to apply myself in college. And like the worst situations with teachers there were never like, you know, it was just like that teacher is an asshole or whatever. It was never like that teacher specifically is targeting me because they don't like me. I had a kindergarten teacher who used to try to give me little setbacks because my parents were some of the few conservatives in town. I grew up in Massachusetts, a blue state, and like my parents were known in my town as like, my dad had run for like local office in town as the Republican, and like the teacher knew that right, and she like would basically like treat me lesser than other kids,
so
which I
awful
didn't
and
know
so
at the
weird.
time. But I didn't know
Like,
this.
don't
at the
be
time.
a teacher then.
Yeah, I didn't really know this at the time because I was a kid, and I'm like, I'm just here at school, and if the teacher's talking to me or not, whatever, I don't care. Cool, fine. I didn't know about this until later, because also my parents, despite being like Republican conservatives in a very blue area in the 80s, never ever talked to me about politics. Never like had like, especially because there was no 24-hour news in the 80s, but it was never like sitting me down and telling me, now Danny, we vote for the conservatives because blah 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 blah. I literally didn't ever learn like politics until 9/11. Until like all of the uncertainty and confusion around 9/11, like suddenly all of that talk, and especially like, you know, the Middle Eastern war and like Iraq, and then, you know, Iran and Iraq, and like George W. Bush, like my parents never sat me down. They kept me out of that stuff. But I had this asshole teacher who treated me badly because I was the kid of the conservatives in town, but I didn't know shit about politics. And in fact, my parents left me so alone on politics that I built my own, like I followed my own heart on issues. So like when it comes to like not being a homophobe, like I definitely had times where I was kind of pushed towards being more homophobic overall. But when I was a kid, like, you know, they never talked about homosexuality at the churches I went to in the 80s. And my parents might have offhandedly said like, oh, you know, homosexuality is a sin or whatever. Like, I'm sure that they were uncomfortable around people that they knew were gay or whatever, you know, or they were trying to be love the sin or hate the sin, which is not the right way to look at it either. But, like, because my parents left me alone when it came to politics and social issues, like, I followed my own heart on things, and I was like, oh, there's no reason to hate gay people. I always felt that way. And it wasn't until I went to those private schools later in high school and ended up going to those youth groups that were associated with those churches from those schools that, like, there was more pressure to, like, think of homosexuals as sinners and stuff like that, and I started to think that way. But because I had not been indoctrinated to that from my whole life, it was easy to break back out of that once I left that atmosphere. So yeah, that kindergarten teacher, there was one other thing I was going to say about it. Right, we did a mock election for 1988. Right, this is how old I am. Bush Senior.
What? No, how is that possible?
I was 6 years old.
Oh my gosh, because I was like one.
Our kindergartner 6 years old?
2, like, at that time.
Maybe I was 5 if you consider where my birthday is in the year. I could have been 5. So, but and I don't know how early it was Bush Senior versus Mike Dukakis was the Democratic hopeful that year. So at whatever point this would have been, however soon Mike Dukakis got the Democratic nomination, I'm not sure.
You would have been 5 going on 6. And by the time the election happened, you would have been 6 because of where your birthday is in November.
Okay. So So in kindergarten in 1988, we have a mock election where we have little ballots and it says George Bush and it says Mike Dukakis, and I'm sure there was a D and an R next to their names. And then we go into the ballot booth, which was like under one of the cubbies. It was like under one of the play sets. Like, we actually went into the ballot booth and we closed the thing and we voted and we came back out. And I don't know if we put them in a box or handed them, but somehow she knew who I voted for. I don't know if we put our names on them or whatever, but I voted for Mike Dukakis because my best friend's name when I was 5 years old was Michael. So I was like, oh, okay. I don't know
as you do as a child,
or Democrats or Republicans. I mean, I knew what Democrat and Republican was, but I did not learn what liberal and conservative meant until 9/11. Almost 20 at that point. I literally didn't know what conservative and liberal meant until the discourse got louder after 9/11. So this fucking piece of shit kindergarten teacher, she's a piece of shit. She looks at it, she's like flabbergasted. She's flabbergasted. This fool.
You're a child.
This old fool is flabbergasted that the son of the conservatives in town voted for Mike Dukakis. I'm a child. I don't know these things. You're an evil witch who thinks that this is important to me. Fucking grow up, lady.
So what's funny is because Danny and I are 4 years apart, we did this exact same thing thousands of miles away in my kindergarten 4 years later, except they had like coloring pictures of Bill Clinton and I don't know, whoever that was, Bush Senior, I guess, yeah. And they were like, okay, who do you want to vote for? Like, you pick the picture that you want to color or whatever. And I picked Bill Clinton because I'm like, oh, he looks like a nice grandfather, versus George Bush, who looked like, I don't know, a not nice grandfather. I don't know. And so I took it and like we had to color it, and then we did the thing in the ballot box, and then like we got them back at the end of the day. And so I took mine home. And they were like, my mom and dad are like, oh, what'd you do today at school? And I'm like, oh, we had an election. We had to vote. And they're like, oh, who'd you vote for? And my aunt and uncle, who are very liberal, were there at the time visiting. And I pulled out my picture and I was like, I voted for this one because I didn't know who it was. And they're just like, and my aunt and uncle thought it was hilarious. And my dad just kind of grumbled. Like, but like, I'm a child. I picked the one there. I was like, I don't know. He looked nice. Right. I don't know.
And the thing is, this is how most people actually vote as adults, by the way. Who looks the nicest? Who would I have a beer with? This is how adults actually vote, okay?
You just did like that little like hands up finger wiggle like Homer Simpson.
So this is the kind of stuff, like, school sucks. Coming back to the first verse of this song, Thiessen is right. School sucks. And, like, it's not even a matter of, like, you know, whether it's a Christian school or a public school. Like, any school in the hands of incompetent administrators can stifle and hurt students and, like, try to put them in a box. Like, if you're in a Christian school and you're too loud, you're too alternative. if you question certain things in the wrong way. I will say, like, for the most part, a lot of, like, the religious teachers at my Christian schools were, like, not super strict and, like, were open to questions and understanding that there was we're kids and we have questions about things and that we could go to them. They were always kind and caring. The main pastor at the church of one of the schools was an amazing pastor, except that he, like, bought into, like, the Pokemon are evil thing. Like, dude. Other than that.
It's always funny when Danny and I talk about our upbringings and about schools because we have polar opposite experiences. Whereas, like, aside from that first year of high school where it was just the owners of the school and the administrators there who really weren't doing things correctly, because educationally I was thriving there, but it was like, you know, I came from, my mom's a teacher, so, like, she was always very involved in everything that I did, you know, from school to extracurriculars. She always volunteered at all my schools. Like, my mom was a known entity, so much so that teachers often called me Jennifer instead of Jessica because my mom's name is Jennifer.
That's so funny because that's what our friend Bo does. What a coincidence.
What a coincidence indeed. So, like, I came from this very, like, let's figure out your learning style and make sure that you're getting enough attention and this and that, to Danny, who was just, like, the opposite, sort of just, here's a school. Go to school, learn the things, and had, you know, these really unfortunate situations with teachers and educators who, you know, did not work with him the way he needed to be worked with, who did not nurture him the way that he should have been. And it always makes me really sad.
This also benefited my sister in a big way because she's 3 years younger than me. And after I had all these really bad issues, the main one I haven't even talked about yet, but all these bad issues with school, especially the public school. My sister, for the most part, stayed in public school. I think she went for 1 or 2 different years to different private schools of her own, like, asking. But my parents had the benefit of realizing that the administrators are not actually there to look out for us. And my parents didn't understand that. They followed what the administrators would say. I got in trouble for lots of legitimate reasons, like getting mad in class or whatever. Like, there was a root to it that wasn't being, like, addressed. But yeah, if I have a real outburst in class, that is my fault, right? Like, it is. I mean, like I said, if the root of the issue was addressed, I wouldn't have had that outburst, but it's my fault. Still, when there are all of these, like, when I'm then identified as a problem kid in school, I'm just a problem kid in that school. It's like the problem with police, with bad police. How it's like, well, once you're a perp, you're a perp. Like, there's no, and hey, that'll lead
even
us
if
right
you're
into
not
the
a
next part
perp,
of the
you're a
song.
perp.
Even if you're not a perp, you're a perp. If you're the wrong skin color, if you're in the wrong area, then that's what you are. Which will lead us into the the pre-chorus, or actually the pre-chorus. So yeah, but the benefit of my sister in this way was that my parents realized the school administrators were not there to look out for our family, which they kind of assumed they would because they're boomers, and kind of school's there to help kids nurture and learn, and that's not what it was by the 80s, and absolutely that's not what it is after the 80s. So the pre-chorus is, it's discussing his priorities, how we're entrusting him with authority. And then there's kind of so the first part references a principle, and obviously that's some wordplay because, like, it's the principle, it's the issue. Using the word principle, Thiessen there is using the word principle in terms of, you know, an issue, a principle. I actually don't know the definition of principle when you're not talking about the job, when it's spelled with a PLE, right?
Primary. It could be like a primary,
right.
Like the principal character in.
So there's obviously wordplay there saying there's a principal and he's a jerk and he's not very good at his job and he's trying to control these children and he's not giving them room to grow and he's not nurturing them in the right way. But then Thiessen's saying it's the principle of the issue that this particular administrator in this school is doing such a bad job to help these kids, right?
PLE is a fundamental truth or proposition that serves as the foundation for a system of belief or behavior or a chain of reasoning.
Gotcha. Then in the pre-chorus, it kind of switches to this sort of judge thing, which it's more wordplay because he's referring to a judge as in the job, because there's a gavel referenced, but he's also talking about judgment that this principal is laying down. So it's kind of this, it's almost like a cross-cut, or like an in-camera transition, like how we're switching between characters. It's not really, I don't think it's supposed to put a specific physical story in mind, but we're kind of cross-cutting between these concepts of like a bad principal and a bad judge. And then he says he finished this racism before it reached the start. So you have a bad judge who's literally racist, and we don't know what it's referring to, but we don't need to know, because we know in our society how many judges just like bring down judgment on someone based on their race, based on a situation that wasn't in their control.
Principal with an AL is first in order of importance main, or of money denoting an original sum, investment, or lent.
Right. Well, I'm an accountant, so you think I'd remember that the word principal doesn't come up in my job a lot, being in accounts payable, but it comes up once in a while when we deal with, what are they called? Leases. So this is like sort of the social justice part of the song, right? It's like he finished this racism before it reached the start. Like this, someone has judged someone based purely on their status, who they are, their race, like the fact that they're a problem kid at the school. Like obviously, like, because that's the thing. Once you're a problem kid at school, no matter how hard you apply yourself, like you're already set back in the minds of these kids. My mom told me a story one time when I was a little kid, probably in the same kindergarten or something, and we went on a field trip to the art museum. My mom was a chaperone, and she wasn't in my group because you didn't chaperone the same group with your kid. And there was some kid there who was like struggling trying to fill out something or do something, and the teacher came up to her and said, "Oh, don't worry about him. He's beyond help."
Jeez, that's awful.
Yeah, like why be a teacher?
Yeah,
why be a teacher? And that
That's
was like
horrible.
the first inkling that my mom had, right? But at the time, she was probably like, "Oh, it's probably that one teacher." No, it's like we were in a system in Massachusetts in the 80s and 90s with horrible, horrible teachers. Like, and I'm sure like their pay and situations and like politics beat them down as well. But the whole system is just fucked.
Yeah, it is, because, and on the flip side of that, because my mom was so involved in my learning and everything, I have a lot of learning issues. Mm-hmm. And so they were like addressed, and I was getting extra help even within, so I went public school for just elementary school. So from kindergarten to 5th grade. And I had a lot of trouble with reading. So I couldn't really like read properly, and like my mom read to me every night. Like I kind of fell, because I was played a favorite of by teachers and stuff, because I was just a nice, quiet girl who, worked hard and, did her thing and was polite, and had a mom who was really involved, and especially really involved at the school. There was some favoritism played towards me, and, some extra attention given to in most of, my classes through, elementary school. And so because of that, I think certain things did kind of, looking back as an adult, I'm like, I think that they let certain things like reading and like what level I was at reading wise slide.
Right.
So I'm like, it's interesting to see sort of it's the other side of the same coin.
Right.
Where it was like my teachers were just like, they understood, and they knew that because I was getting extra help in school, I was getting extra help at home, but so they knew that I was working towards it.
Right.
And because of that, they just kind of like where my level was at reading wise, they let it slide.
Right.
Now I'm a great reader. I read all the time. I read like every night before bed, but that took me a really long time to get to that point, because it just wasn't my strong suit. I had a lot of difficulty doing that growing up.
Right. And it's not even like, I can see how some of that can seem as like privilege or whatever, right? But it's not even like privilege because they weren't doing you any favors. It's more like they just didn't want to bother because like maybe they were treating you nice, but also like maybe they were in some cases like afraid of doing something wrong or offending your mom or something and causing a stir.
My mom actually really wanted me to be held back in like when I was going from preschool, after I finished preschool and I was about to go into elementary school and kindergarten, my mom really wanted me to be held back.
Right.
And I don't know if it was the like government in general or if it was the state of Georgia would not allow me to because I was like I was not below whatever the line was enough to get held back. And my mom was like, socially, I don't think she's ready. I know that in certain education wise, she's not ready. Being a teacher herself and a very good teacher at that, she was like, I know that she's not ready.
Right.
And it's a good thing that she didn't hold me back because then I wouldn't have met you since we met in college when I was 18 at the proper age. But
a lot of people end up not because of like privilege or nepotism. Not that this is not to call nepotism in this situation your fault in any way, but not for those kind of reasons. But sometimes kids get moved along in school just because they don't want to deal with them, or there's a number or a quota. Like someone's actually failing and they don't feel confident that they've completed the grade that they need, but they're like, well, just put them into the next grade because we can't have a certain number of failures and we got to push them along, or we don't want to have to, we don't have the time to deal with them.
Yeah, or we think they'll learn it eventually. They're showing enough strides that they're trying.
Right, but I mean, there might be other situations. Yeah,
I'm saying
some kids might be able to pull themselves up in that way, but other kids might not. Like some kids might get pushed along and they can't read at the level they're at because the school just pushed them along in grade after grade after grade because it's like we don't want to hold you back, not because we don't want to not to help you, but because we don't want to seem responsible for the fact that you're not learning. So we'll keep pushing you along in the system.
Well, especially in like elementary school, it's a little bit different because it's like if you're doing, you have one teacher for everything. So if you're doing, so strongly in other subjects, they don't want to, hold you back unless it's like an overall issue with all of the things. So like if you're doing well in, with writing and science or whatever, but you're like just passing math, but like you're not doing very well with reading or whatever it is, then they're like, just you should, because you're at the other levels, you're there.
Right.
So, you technically are learning well enough to move on.
Well, going back to the song, there is a genius annotation for the line, "He finished this racism before it reached the start." And I'm like, I mean, I get it. The annotator says, this is a play on words. He finished this race-ism before he reached the start, meaning he made a poor judgment before getting to know you, right? So it's like a race and a start, but it's racism. And yeah, I get it. The thing is, like, obviously Thiessen is an amazing, like, wordsmith and puns and wordplay and all these things, but I feel like this one is, sure, you need the annotation to explain to people who might have missed it. But referring to race as in, our ethnicities and our differences, and then race as in, speeding and trying to beat a race, like the way race means two things, that's going to be one of the most common puns ever in terms of art that deals with and poetry and lyrics that deal with race. Like that's not the most original thing in a Relient song. Like that's got to be one of the most overused one outside of other contexts. I mean, in this song, I'm not disparaging Thiessen's use of it here because there's so much other stuff already happening with the principal also means principal, and the judge also means the job of a judge, and the principal is judging, but he's not the judge. It's wordplay after wordplay after wordplay. So in this context, Thiessen using a very common pun makes sense all put together in this first part of the song. But I'm just saying, like, this is not the one to specially note when it's so overly used by other songs. So now we get into, how long are we into this? We're an hour and 20. So now we finally get to Christ. We finally get to Jesus. Because
this might be a two-parter episode.
No, maybe. But as I said, this pre-chorus and the chorus and the verse before it can absolutely be taken out of the context of Christ and just say this is an issue. whether from a Christian or a non-Christian point of view, a secular point of view, or a point of view from any other religion or philosophy, racism and judgment and school systems just stifling people is an issue. It doesn't even necessarily have to do with Christ. But then it's tied back here into Christ, which I have even more stuff to say about. The chorus is, Jesus loved the outcasts. He loves the ones the world just loved to hate. And as long as there's a heaven, there'll be a failure to excommunicate. So this is an amazing line. Obviously, the reference to the movie Cool Hand Luke, starring Paul Newman, where he's a prisoner. I mean, it already ties so well together to everything else we've talked about. When like a cop sees you as a perp, you're always a perp, and that's so common in prison movies. Where, he's basically this guy, Paul Newman's character is someone who refuses to be like stifled by this system. Like, he doesn't want to be in prison, but he makes the best of it he can, and he won't let this system beat him down. So he kind of like plays it up, and he's constantly like, I've seen the movie, it's been a while, but he's like constantly trying to get people, all the other prisoners' spirits up, and he kind of needles the guards in just the right way to like seem like a problem, but not too much of a problem, and eventually it all comes to a head, and I can't remember how it ends. I think he gets killed in the end. It's referred to...
Spoiler warning.
Well, it's referred to as a Christ analogy. That's a whole nother discussion. But the movie is referred to by scholars as a Christ analogy. So to take that, to say we have a failure to communicate. That's the line from Cool Hand Luke. And it's a line that lives well past that movie. People say that all the time. We have a failure to communicate. I think it's also said in Full Metal Jacket. He might also say it there, but that's not what it's most famously known for. And so here the pun is failure to excommunicate, which I think a lot of people could come up with that pun overall. Like, it's pretty easy to think of the word communicate and you put the word X on it. So you say failure to excommunicate. Anyone could come up with that pun, but here it is the cornerstone, the perfect explanation of this song's philosophy overall. And that is that no matter how much racism and horrible systems and awfulness there is from people in the world, how much rejection and how much bullying there is in the world, and it all comes down to basically rejection. It all comes down to someone sees you and they just hate you. Someone sees you and they just want to torture you. Someone sees you and they just reject you outright. They don't want to bring you into their life. It all comes down to rejection. Christ doesn't reject anybody because excommunication is... I need to look up the word excommunication, but I know in the context of Catholicism and Christianity, it means when you're pushed out of a church. You're like, we don't want you in this church anymore. And specifically in Catholicism, where like salvation came through the church, if you got excommunicated from the church, like literally you're just going to hell, right?
It's
like
it's a cutting off of communication.
Right.
Like it also happens in the Amish culture where
Right.
you're excommunicated from the church, the town, your whole community.
Right. So in like before the Protestant Reformation, I'm not a theologian, but I know what I know just from school and from here and there, right? Before the Protestant Reformation and all that stuff, and when the Catholic Church is the Christian church and they make the decisions, and it's human beings who say they're in communication with God. But let's just be serious. Let's just human beings who are in charge of the church, and they make judgments on other human beings in their church, and they say, well, you're excommunicated or whatever, or you have to come to us, the people, the leaders of the church, to get your salvation, right? And then Protestantism exists now, and like no matter all the other issues we have with Christianity in America today, it all comes down to the fact that you believe in Christ and you're saved. And Christ is in your life, he's in your heart, and he makes you a better person. You might also say, some people might also say that Christ died on the cross to save all of us.
Yeah.
And maybe some people don't want to hear that, but maybe that's the case. And so Christ will never excommunicate you. Christ will never push you away like the judge and the principal did, right? And like the church does. And like communities now, bringing it back to modern times, when you're in a church and something goes wrong in your life and everybody judges you, Like all the like people in your church are like, oh, you hear what he did? Oh, don't talk to him. He's a you know. I don't want to make up hypothetical situations, but we all know what I'm talking about. You're in a church and something happens, and instead of being treated with Christian love in a hard time, you're treated like you're broken material and they don't want you around.
Which is a real problem with, and something that both Danny and I kind of have an issue with the organization
Right.
of organized religion.
Right.
In that, and to me, religion is always, spirituality has just always been so personal. It's such a personal thing, because if you look and if you do believe the Bible and if you do read, into it, you're seeing that God loves everyone. Jesus loves everyone. You were put on this world. So like some organization being like, no, you're not loved now. Like, no, like you can still talk to God. You don't have to go to a special place to do that. You can talk to him anywhere.
And I can only speak for what like I feel like I've been taught from church and from Christian schools my whole life. But when you're taught in a certain way to like what's going on over there with those people, that's sin. And what's going on with those people that believe that thing, they're going to hell. Right? When you see all that, and I'm like, well then they say, oh, by the way, Jesus loves the outcast. They'll say that in church. And it's like, yeah, but you're also teaching me that like homosexuals are going to hell. Like
they don't put it into practice.
I definitely had situations in those later high school churches and schools where it was like said, if not strongly implied, that if you believe in Christ but you're gay, like you're going to hell. Like you can't be gay and be Christian. And I'm like, that makes no sense, because it's like I couldn't wrap my head around it. I'm like,
because you think that a murderer can get saved,
yeah.
But like just because of who you love, you can't. It makes no sense,
right? And it's like, well, they're living, and
they repented,
Yeah,
like,
it's like, well, they'll need to repent of their homosexuality. It's like, no, that's literally not. I mean, even from within, and we talked about this, I think, in the God episode. It's like even from within the rationale that you have, like the Christian rationale that you have, like that still doesn't make sense, because even if you accept that, which I don't, thinking in the rationale of homosexuality is a sin, it doesn't matter if you repent of it or not, because once you have Christ in your heart, that's it. You're saved. He's in you no matter what. It doesn't matter where your thing goes into what things or what things rub against what things. Like no physical thing excommunicates your salvation from Christ. Your body doesn't matter. By the way, speaking of that high school, this just put this in my mind. I have no way of pulling it up right now. But the alumni Facebook group for that Christian school that I graduated from, where I met my friend Johnny, somebody put some copy pasta on there, like that was like, some stupid like chainmail copy pasta thing that you post all over and you send in emails and you put on your Facebook wall of like, here's a bunch of little stories about people who said, I don't need God, and the next day they died. Like Marilyn Monroe said, there's no God and I am the only God, or whatever. She didn't say that, but this is the breakdown of the story. And the next day she was dead in a hotel room. And this famous politician said, well, there's no Christ and blah, blah, blah. And the next day he was run over in the street, whatever, right? It's like, stop trying to make God a fucking boogeyman who's like some sort of like...
The Beatles said they're bigger than Jesus, and like everybody's still listening to them. 2 of them are still around.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. It's like,
not the one that said it, but
I don't
took
believe,
a few more years.
Like, despite anything else that I might believe that Christians or people who are more evangelically minded might think that I think is heretical, the fact is, Christ saves you. Our God now, in the Christian way of thinking, is not the Old Testament God. He doesn't strike you down for saying things. That doesn't f***ing happen, all right? God's not a boogeyman waiting to strike you down for saying the wrong thing. Think of a parent. Think of a parent of a child, and the child is having a temper tantrum because they didn't get their cookie. And they start saying at the parent, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you because you won't give me that cookie. A reasonable parent understands at that moment that my 3-year-old doesn't literally hate me. Maybe you have a tinge because, oh, I can't believe they're saying this to me and it hurts a little. But you don't actually But hopefully later you can laugh because you're like, well, my child doesn't literally hate me because they're not having a cookie. They just picked up the concept of hate somewhere and they're overusing it. And they're saying, I hate you because you won't give me that cookie. And you say, no, you can't have the cookie, and you let them have their temper tantrum, and you're a good parent, and you hopefully teach them right from wrong later on. A parent, the kid says, I want that cookie, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you, smack. That's a shitty parent. Which parent is God? Is God the one who fucking smacks the shit out of their kid because they said, I hate you because you won't give me my cookie? Or is it the parent who stands by and says, this kid just hasn't figured out life yet, and I love them, and I have nothing but patience and love in my heart for them, so I'm not going to fucking take it personally when my 3-year-old tells me they hate me because they saw it in a Marvel movie and they don't actually know what it means. My God is the calm one. My God is not the fucking Old Testament God who strikes you down because you said something wrong. So this copy pasta on this Facebook group outraged me, and I actually replied to it very calmly. And I was like, God is not a fucking boogeyman there to strike you down because you said the wrong thing. I don't care what you do on earth. I don't believe in this like ironic narrative of your life. I think if you pray to the Lord, if you pray to the universe, if you pray, you bring goodness into you. The unseen force that is God comes into your life and it brings good things out. But if you expel hate and anger, then it brings back more hate and anger on you. But this idea that it's like a narrative of like you curse God and then suddenly you're struck by lightning, that's just a f***ing coincidence. But it becomes this narrative of that's what happened. You know what I mean? Or like, it's because my God is not a television writer trying to figure out the most like shocking, ironic twist for the season closer for your life. He's a God of patience and love who does not excommunicate you because of some shit. He's God. He's up there in the sky, or he's in another plane of existence, or he's around us, or he's whatever. He doesn't give a shit if I knock this dog skin ointment on the ground. God's not now mad at me because I did that, and he's not going to serve out some special punishment to me. Same as if I walk down the street and I stab a random person. Like, obviously I have put awfulness into the world, and like awfulness is going to now continue to procreate through the world because I just killed somebody. But it's not like,
God's your parent who loves
God
you,
still forgives
even
me for
though
killing
you
that
said
person.
you hated them because they wouldn't let you have the cookie.
Maybe I took it a little far with the difference between throwing something on the ground and killing somebody. But you know what I mean? Like, it's awful when you're a murderer, but God has forgiveness even for the murderers. So God has forgiveness for the things that are barely sin that people push as more like sin.
It's very uniquely put, Dan. I like the message. I think that you should become a new age pastor where you just swear a lot.
Those exist. No, those for sure exist. There was one in Orlando, and unfortunately I never went to it. I never went to their church, but I used to hear about the pastor that swears in Orlando. So there's so many more lyrics that we didn't get to. So, but maybe before that we'll go take our break, and we'll be right back.
We already took a break.
What?
We took a break.
What do you mean? I'm kidding, I know. So, let's quickly, we said so much, but let's just quickly go through these lyrics. It's disgusting, his priorities, how we're entrusting him with authority. His gavel's gone down before he looked in your heart. I know I already read this, but one thing I forgot to say
You could almost read that as an anti-Christian thing, too.
I guess, because, like, there's always the thing about how God puts people in authority. There's always that excuse when, like, awful people are in authority, like Hitler was like, well, God allowed him to be in authority, or whatever. I also have a memory of my first Christian school, where I was there, and I was like, hey, how did, there's a kid there named Brandon. I'm like, how did Brandon become one of the leaders of, he's just a kid at the school as well. And it's like, how to become the leader of, whatever section of something at the school for something. And this like tool of a teacher is like, God put him there. I'm like, yeah, but how did he get in that position?
Not
God
an
put him
answer.
there. That's not an answer. And it's in no way like in service of God to do that. Like, yeah, okay, sure, God puts people in authority. If you believe that, like, absolutely.
And that's a question that had an easy answer to it.
I know. Like,
when you're like a parent and you're like, because God said so, to like some really difficult
or, oh, no, we can't go for ice cream,
question
they're closed, or
Right.
whatever. Or turn the light off because in the car because it's illegal. It's like, it was an easy answer. And she wasn't benefiting God's divine plan in any way to say that. If anything, if she does that to other people, she's only cutting off opportunities for the Lord to put people in positions of authority. So she's just a jerk. She was a jerk. Whatever. I'm spicy today.
Spicy. You have a problem with authority.
The world just keeps you at arm's length. Every week you work up the strength to fight the flames that are hurled. Let your faith shine right through. You know it's the world versus Jesus and you. So this also kind of ties back to that original concept I had of the song, that it's about Christian persecution. But it's not... It can be interpreted that way, but it's not really exactly about that. And it's not like he's saying here, it's the world versus you and your faith in Jesus. It can be interpreted that way. But I'm also now, in the context of everything we've been saying, like, I can see how it's the world versus you, which is true of literally every person on the planet. The world is against you at all times. But the idea is you have Christ with you, and now it's the world versus Jesus and you, who can be against you, right? Like, you have the strength now because you have your faith in Christ. It can be interpreted or misinterpreted as the world versus you and your faith in Christ, but I don't see it that way anymore. There'll be a failure to excommunicate, and then that intro. So I think that's most of the lyrics. I'm just so spicy and fired up that I don't feel like getting into more of the lyrics. So let's do your deep dive. When we get to my covers, we're actually going to skip them this week because, as I mentioned, the covers are actually very bad. We'll talk about that in a minute.
So we have song meanings.
I think we did the song meanings pretty well. Someone's working outside. Someone's doing construction or something outside. Shush, April.
You don't want to hear the song meanings?
No, I do. I'm kidding.
So Danny, who is this? Back in 2002, said, "Hey guys, I think what he's saying is that it really sucks when people judge you without knowing you, but Jesus looks at your heart, so as long as there's a heaven, there'll be a failure to excommunicate, meaning no matter what other people say, if you're for Jesus, then no one can touch you or throw you out, because we win in the end anyways. Isn't God awesome?"
But all he said was, as long as there's a heaven, there's a failure to excommunicate. So it's not necessarily to me that as long as you have faith in Christ, there's a failure to excommunicate. He said, as long as there's a heaven, as long as heaven exists, no one will be excommunicated.
Screamo 777 on July 12th, 2002 said, "This is a friggin' awesome Relient K song.
Whoa, language.
I've been a fan of you're one to talk. I've been a fan of these guys for a long time now, and I'm glad they're getting some airplay now. Relient K rocks live too.
I guess
this song is about how people can turn away from you and make you an outcast. But God will never do that to you. God keeps his promises, and outcast or no outcast, God's on your side if you're on his. It's a cool song, kids. Heart." Weezer Girl _06 on June 3rd, 2004 said, "This song means that if you are a loser and people make fun of you for what you believe in, that doesn't matter at all because God loves you all the way. People may try to take God away from you, but you will never be taken from God." Very powerful message. Preacher Man 837 on May 19th, 2006 said, "This song is quite literal. It means that being a Christian, you are an outcast, and the world judges you according to this."
Right.
Reminds me of a verse from, this is basically just
my original interpretation of the song back then.
2 Corinthians 14:17, "For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. You will never be judged according to your social status, your looks, your intelligence, or anything by my King. Jesus died for you. Do you live for Jesus?"
Do you?
Yeah, so there's just more along the same lines. No one's over here going, this song's about a girl or anything. Right. So next up, we have a Reddit thread. So at r/ReliantK, Boy on Laptop 6 years ago wrote in this discussion, "So, re-listening to Failure to Excommunicate, I've always wondered what this part meant. It's discussing his priorities and how we're entrusting him with authority. His gavel's gone down before he looked in your heart. He finished this racism before he reached the start. Who is he? I remember reading a book a while back that it had to do with a well-publicized court case involving racism.
Read a
It's
book about it?
Also, it's a stretch, but wondering with the timing if it's anti-Bush referring to Iraq. Thoughts? There are 7 comments.
But I don't understand. There was a book he read, or they read, about this song and what it's based on?
Silent Ransom replied 6 years ago, I would honestly be shocked if it was about Bush. Remember, Relient K is from Ohio, and during this time, their lyrics were extremely conservative religiously. I would be surprised if they had taken to attacking the President of the United States.
I wouldn't say their lyrics were extremely... there were a handful of songs that were extremely conservative, but it's not like all their songs were extremely conservative.
But still, I can't come up with a better idea. As a sub, we should tweet the hell out of Matt and Hoops to get them to answer this, haha. Boy on laptop, I guess in reply to, we're extremely conservative religiously, said, right. True, but this limited political content in their songs does seem more liberal than conservative. Also, just because they're religiously conservative doesn't mean they are politically conservative. And then Silent Ransom responded to that. True, I would still be pretty surprised just because content like that could potentially alienate more conservative fans at the time. Which I agree with. If you're going to be a Christian band, you're not going to be like putting out anti-Bush stuff because a good chunk of your listener base is parents are going to take the CDs off if they know. So
right. Also, like those lines that what year was this post?
6 years ago.
6 years ago. I mean, 6 years ago, it's in the context. Okay, so because those lines between the idea that there's a line between religiously conservative and politically conservative, that line doesn't really exist anymore, right? Like we think we all understand that line doesn't exist, but in our society as we know it today, and certainly in 2002, kind of as I mentioned, because of 9/11, like those lines were blurred. And I mean, we weren't adults in the 80s. Like we kind of know now from context of history how conservative the world was in, Reaganomics age and stuff. But I don't know, I could have blinders on, but in the year 2002, I don't feel like those lines were completely destroyed yet. I don't think the line between political and religious conservative were completely destroyed. Mm-hmm. Maybe in the South, maybe in certain like more religious sections of the country, of course, but like overall, again, I'm from Boston, so it's like more especially the way I grew up in Boston, like a lot of the Protestant Christians were people who had been Catholic and stuff, and it's a more Catholic area, so maybe, what do I know? But I just feel like I didn't go to like Christian festivals and find a lot of politics being discussed there.
Yeah, I mean, I still think that it's more of just like a respect kind of a thing. Like, I think that parents would be like, oh, it's weird that they're attacking the president regardless of political affiliation.
Right. And
would not be okay with it. Like, regardless of, my parents' politics, my dad would always be like, you just have to respect whatever president is in office.
Sure you do.
Yeah. Well, so anyways, that was the thing that he would say growing up, though, right? So I'm saying even that older mentality,
right.
I don't think that, parents in general would be cool with attacking any president, per se. Like,
is there anything else in that Reddit?
Yeah, Dreidel 5 years ago said, it's about the Pope. The whole song is criticizing papal infallibility and his ability to excommunicate good people from the church for making mistakes.
I did kind of reference that earlier, and I don't know if that is what the song is about, but that is like part of the history of what he's referencing. Like the fact that this is even an aspect of Christianity goes back to the Catholic Church.
Then we have some Tumblr posts, and I just thought that this was kind of interesting and cool, this picture.
I found that. I posted it.
Oh, nice. So you already posted it.
Before we recorded, I went through Twitter and was just looking at anyone who kind of quoted or was talking about the song. It's pretty easy to type in failure excommunicate, and a lot of it is Relient K references. So someone had posted that on Twitter, and I retweeted it. It's like a long perspective. What do you call that kind of perspective? It's like low. Wait.
It's a long shot.
It's like a long shot. So like the brick ground goes off into the distance, and there's a homeless person, a houseless person, an unhoused person sitting there holding an electric guitar, sitting by a tree, and then along the ground, which I think is digitally added, are the words, Jesus loved the outcasts, he loved the ones the world just loved to hate.
Relient K.
Relient K.
So then the next post down from that is JF Hobbit said, "This song is my new religion. I just can't even describe the awesomeness. Context: I've been listening to Vitamin String Quartet obsessively, as it is the best studying music I've found, and I've been studying a lot. Further context: Relient K has been my favorite band for 13 years, and this was one of my original favorite songs. When I found the VSQ album of RK covers on Spotify, I did a happy dance. This song definitely delivered on the promise of happiness." T Turquoise Vibes said, "Guys, I just noticed something. Okay, so you know the song Failure to Excommunicate by Relient K, and you also know the song Life After Death and Taxes Failure 2 by Relient K? Well, last night, just as I was about to fall asleep, I realized Life After Death and Taxes is the sequel to Failure to Excommunicate, Failure 2, Failure Part 2. Wow, I'm either really dumb or really smart. Listening to the endings of both songs."
Okay, I mean, yes, that is what it is reference to.
Then we have there's a game, I guess, called Rocksmith, where you play an actual guitar.
I found this as well. Yeah,
where they put
it's
in
like
the
Guitar
custom
Hero,
song.
but you play a real guitar.
Yeah, Failure to Excommunicate custom song, and I thought that was cool. So
it's on Steam. That makes sense. Because why would it be on a console?
Yeah, so I thought that was really neat. Yeah, it just looks like Guitar Hero, but you play an actual guitar. Like,
Right.
I guess it looks like there's a little bar over the strings or something, so it knows what you're pressing down when, which is a great idea and something that I've always thought, like, that should totally be a thing to help you, because
Right.
Guitar Hero is like, so,
Or they should have at least made like an advanced Guitar Hero that had more buttons.
Yeah, for sure.
So you could maybe, it's like more, not perfectly, but more closely approximate, finger positions of chords and notes.
And that's pretty much all I have. There's like some other forums out there that are like song meaning type stuff, but it's kind of
Gotcha.
the same of what we've already seen.
People who wrote like maybe essays about the song or reference the song
Yeah.
in an essay about something. Gotcha. Well, this was performed. We're back to the show again already. Cornerstone 2003. I feel like we keep picking songs from this set. So this is uploaded by Stimpy789. I don't always reference that. Although, you Google Cornerstone 03 Relient K, you're going to find it. So here is Relient K playing the song Failure to Excommunicate Part 1. So that's Dave singing. And Dave and Matt's voices, Thiessen's voices, complement each other so much. Mm-hmm. I swear, because most of the time when it's Dave singing, that part of my brain that says, oh wait, this isn't Thiessen doesn't trip, Mm-hmm. When it's Hoops singing, Hoops has a quality also very similar to Thiessen, but I'm still like, oh, this isn't Thiessen. When it's Dave singing, I swear, I'm just like, nothing's coming up in my brain that says something's off here. And then when Thiessen gets up to the mic for the "It's Disgusting," the priorities part, like, they just complement each other so much. Mm-hmm. And they really should have had like Dave doing maybe a few more leads in different songs, because he's just as good a singer as Thiessen.
What's hilarious is that someone in the audience or in the crowd threw a toilet paper roll across the crowd halfway through that.
And it's not, and I know that as a drummer, like, he probably doesn't want to be singing a lot of songs live back then. But, you know, in terms of the live set and exhaustion and stuff, but just on the albums, at least, Dave should have sang more. And then Thiessen, because their voices have such similar quality, Thiessen could sing them, and no one would bat an eye at the live shows.
Hasn't he ever heard of Phil Collins?
There you go, exactly. But also, like, Phil Collins and Peter Gabriel also have very similar qualities, right? I mean, they were both singers of Genesis for a reason, and like, one would be the background vocals for the other solo albums a couple of times. Because they have that similar kind of tone, I feel like here, Thiessen and Dave are basically in the same way.
Loves to hate. As long as there's a heaven, Relient to excommunicate.
Yeah, it's good. This is the best performance. This is one of the good performances of this song on YouTube.
Nice.
Certainly from the time with Brian and the band. There's one other video from the time of Brian and Dave when this was played, and it's much more lacking performance. But then here's one from 2012. So this is from this Canton, Ohio show while there was work being done on Collapsible Lung. The same show we come up to whenever we do a Collapsible Lung song that was being played a lot before the album came out, because they premiered a bunch of Collapsible Lung songs at this same show. But in this case, here they're going to play Failure and Failure 2, like sort of back to back, and Dave is at the show, even though it's Ethan on drums, and Dave comes up to the front of the stage with a microphone in hand and sings the song. I like the more modern Relient K guitar tone on this.
Yeah, for sure.
Less attempt to sort of be pseudo-hardcore here, and more just accepting like what a Relient K guitar sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I wish this was a song that they played more often in later, modern times with John and John in the band. But if that happened, it wasn't on YouTube. Okay, April. I know. You know what? I want to go back real quick and double check. I didn't see how they outro the song at Cornerstone. Because I know here they just kind of like, fade out. They just kind of stop and then they transition into Failure 2. Here, I'm going to go back to Cornerstone 2003. Song feels extra long. I mean, it's a pretty long song, but I don't feel like it outwears its welcome on the record, but feels super long at Cornerstone 03. I love that everyone with their arms up, praise and worship in the front.
Thanks a lot, Cornerstone.
Oh,
They just play the record in the
Yeah.
background.
yeah, and they have the recording there from the end with the radio whistle and everything. That's cool. I was gonna say if that kid at the YMCA skate park could praise and worship to Softer to Me, certainly people at Cornerstone 2003 could praise and worship to different parts of this song. So the covers are interesting, and we're going to do them on Patreon because we're a positive show and we don't like to excommunicate anybody, but we won't have much positive to say about these covers. There are a lot. I think I said this 14 hours ago when we started this podcast. There are a lot of situations of teen bands like that are barely together as a band, trying to do this song and doing
Amazing.
a poor job of it. My favorite one, and you'll have to sign up at patreon.com/SadieHawkinsPod. My favorite one is a situation which I don't think we've come up against, but it's like one of my. I don't even think I've seen it a bunch in real life, but you know it happens, and I love it. It's that someone agreed to let the teen rock band that's part of the community of this church play for Sunday service. Like the wannabe rock, punk, hardcore, probably have some rap rock influence in there, all kinds of influences. And so you have the gray hairs in the audience and they're just having to watch this like School of Rock wannabe hardcore band. And I'm
Amazing.
like, yes.
Fantastic.
And you'll hear all about that at patreon.com/SadieHawkinsPod. So, two things we'll end on. One is, this was the first that I'd ever seen, a tribute to a different band set to a song by a different band. In
Wait,
this case,
what?
In this case, someone took Failure to Excommunicate by Relient K and set it to a tribute to their other favorite band, Tokyo Hotel. So they just have like footage and pictures of the band Tokyo Hotel.
Oh, okay.
And they just cut together a fan music video about how much they love Tokyo Hotel, and they even kind of like have on-screen text to like, if this is your first time exploring the existence of this
Interesting.
band,
Okay.
they're letting you know who the singers are, and who the singer is, and who the members are. But it's all set to the Relient K song "Failure to Excommunicate."
That's a choice.
It's just singer Bill Kalitz. I've never known the names of the band members of Tokyo Hotel. Tom Kaolitz is the guitarist. Bassist George Listing. I'm learning so much today.
This is a very pretty band.
Yeah.
It's a very pretty band.
Drummer Gustav Schaefer. So part of me wondered if like that's Tokyo Hotel. Just like letting you know.
Nice.
So part of me wondered was like, this a situation, I don't know the music of Tokyo Hotel. I know I've heard a song or two, but was this a situation of like where they downloaded a song that was labeled as Tokyo Hotel and it was this Relient K song?
Maybe.
But then
It's in the description.
This was
Relient K?
uploaded in 2008, but then in the description it says, this video is about all the guys in Tokyo Hotel, and this song is called Failure to Excommunicate and sung by Relient K.
Oh, well, there you go.
So you know that. Anyway, please leave a comment. But I guess they just wanted, and then there's no comments.
Nice. Maybe they're their two favorite bands.
So everyone, go to YouTube, type in Tokyo Hotel fan video,
Everyone
Failure
do
to
this.
Excommunicate, and say, hey, Ms. Kalutz. The YouTube neighbor's name is Miss, and it's the last name of the singer and guitarist, but with like extra letters mixed in. You don't have to say their name. Just say, hey, leaving a comment like you asked. Everyone, go to Tokyo Hotel fan video, Failure to Excommunicate, and say, hey, leaving a comment like you asked. Sorry I'm so late.
You wonder why teachers didn't like you and pegged you as a bad kid.
I
You're
want
such
this
a little
person,
instigator.
How's it instigating? They asked nicely for people to leave comments, and after 13 years, nobody has. That's not fair. I want to lift them up. I'm in the message of this song, and I'm saying, let's make sure this person doesn't. They didn't get the communication they asked for. They were excommunicated. People didn't show them the love that they asked for comments. This video's got 840 views after 13 years, so people should have left comments, but they excommunicated and did not do that.
Danny, do you like this song more or less or the same as before?
I think I like it the same because, like, I've always identified, not always, because I interpreted it one way when I was younger, and interpreted it another way now, but this message speaks to me. I think this is like Relient K's, certainly from this period, where, as the song meanings person said, they had so many philosophically conservative lyrics. This is like one of the most sound and strong, and speaks to me anyway, theological songs that they had from this album.
Nice.
And once I saw this Invader Zim tribute set to the song,
amazing. Right on.
because if anything, I realized I had the song wrong all these years. This video is uploaded by CeeLo Neal, and the video is called Zim's Failure to Excommunicate. So I realized, oh my gosh, this song was about Invader Zim the whole time.
Nice.
And it's about how he was excommunicated from the planet to Earth.
Gotcha.
And he took it in stride.
Sure.
And so, Jessica, how do you
Wait,
feel
didn't
about this
he,
song?
like, isn't his point that he wants to take over the world or something? Or mind control or something?
Sure.
I never watched
We'll get more
Invader
into that, but first
Zim.
tell me, do you like this song more, the same, or less than before we covered it?
You know, I'd never really properly listened to it before, and so I think I like it a little more now because I actually really listened to it.
Good. So, before we go, Invader Zim was the worst invader on his planet.
Okay.
So his bosses send him to Earth because Earth is the
I
least
thought he was a
important
child.
planet. Yeah, Jess, let me tell you.
Sorry.
Oh my gosh. So they send him to Earth because Earth is the least important planet that they have information about. They don't care about Earth. So they're like, send Invader Zim to Earth. Hey, Invader
That feels
Zim.
pretty sound, actually.
Yeah, here's and they lie to him and say, this is our most important mission because he's the worst. He gets to Earth, he disguises himself as a child, goes to school. Another kid there named Dib realizes he's an alien. He's the only one that knows he's an alien. Invader Zim. Now, Zim was excommunicated, but because Zim believes in our Lord Jesus Christ, he did not let the excommunication of the tallest, his bosses, get him down. He knows he is saved through Christ's love. And if anything, the story of Invader Zim is the story about someone coming to Earth and realizing the salvation of Christ. I'm pretty sure if you go watch the Netflix sequel movie, that's the point of the whole series. Go ask I don't remember his first name, Jay Vasquez. I'm almost positive. Everybody tweet at Jay Vasquez and ask, is Invader Zim saved?
Thanks for listening.